Welcome, everyone, to another Science of the Times podcast. I'm Tim Colson.
Hi, I'm Syma Khalid.
And how are you this week, Syma?
Yeah, good, thanks. Lots
You're
of relaxing and work, so all good.
good. Have you noticed all the wasps around?
Did you? Yes, I really have. And I'm wondering if this, someone's told you what happened to me or someone witnessed it a couple of days ago.
I don't know yet. Tell the listeners what happened.
So I went out for dinner with a dear friend of mine, Jane Wallace, at just in the Westgate shopping centre in Oxford, and we went in and sort of we hadn't booked a table, so we said, "Do you have a table?" And they said, "Well, we only have one table left. It's outside, but we're a bit worried there might be a few wasps around." So we thought, that's fine. We can deal with a few wasps. So we sat down, we ordered some drinks, and then as the food came, we just got absolutely swamped by wasps. So in the end, we ended up having our meal by running to the table, taking a mouthful, then running around to get away from the wasps, back to the table, another mouthful, and then again. So yes, I'm all too.
Did either of you get stung?
No, luckily we didn't.
Okay. Well, so this year has been a really good year for predatory insects. So we had all the ladybugs in the US around earlier that were feeding on the aphids. And then it's a very, very good year for wasps, apparently. And so we're going to get on Seirian Sumner. We'll introduce her just now. And she's an expert on wasps, and she's written a fantastic book called Endless Forms, which is all about wasps. It's about their evolution. She explains that ants are wasps that have forgotten how to fly, and bees are wasps that have forgotten how to hunt. And I think you'll enjoy chatting to her, and our listeners will enjoy it too. So, should we get her on?
Yeah, let's do that.
Excellent. So, Sarian, I wonder if you could perhaps start by introducing yourself and saying a little bit about who you are.
Absolutely, yeah. So I am Seirian Sumner. I'm a professor of behavioural ecology at UCL, and I have a strong weakness for wasps.
And that comes across in your excellent book, Endless Forms, which came out a little while ago. And it was published by, remind me who it's published by?
William Collins.
William Collins. And we will put a link to the book in underneath the podcast. But I
Excellent.
thoroughly recommend everyone to read it, all our listeners to read it. I'm a zoologist, so I don't mind wasps, but if you're not sure about wasps, you should definitely read this book because, as we're about to learn, they are truly remarkable creatures. But Syma, are you a wasp lover?
I- Is anyone who doesn't do work in doesn't do research in wasps a wasp lover? I think it's a bit natural for most of us to be a little bit afraid of them, right? I mean, I think it's just something that's in sort of popular culture. Wasps are something to be afraid of. That's the way we sort of grow up thinking about them. So how did you get into wasps, I guess?
Well, I'm also a product of that same culture in that I never used to like wasps. And I accidentally fell into the wasp world. I did my undergraduate at UCL, and one of the reasons why I chose UCL is because they had quite a strong animal behaviour angle at the time. And by the end of my degree, I kind of realised I wanted to do research and really wanted to study animal behaviour for a PhD. And it just so happened there was a new young lecturer, Jeremy Field, who'd arrived and was looking for a student, had some money back in the day when they came with their own PhD students, in new positions. And it was behaviour. So it was the evolution of social behaviour. And I was interested and recommended. And I remember having this conversation with him very clearly. And I said, well, I think the question's really interesting, Jeremy, but I really don't like wasps. I just don't want to get stung. And he went, oh, no, 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 don't worry. These wasps don't sting. I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. That was a big fat lie. Of course they sting. But to be fair, these were the Malaysian hover wasps, Stenogastrini. And they are social wasps. They do live in a group, and they do have stings. They're aculeate wasps, but their stings are very delicate. And in fact,
Did you
are
ever get
described.
Did you ever get stung by one?
Yeah, a little bit, but really only if it was like, their response to any kind of scariness or predation is they just literally fall off the nest. And so sometimes they'd fall down your neck and then you
Oh.
get a little bit stung, where your skin is really delicate. But really their stings are described as a delicate, fragrant tickle. I wouldn't quite describe them like that, but that's technically how they describe. But they don't sting very much. They were really good gateway wasp. So if you're thinking of getting into wasps, then beginners level wasp. They are,
I'll make a note.
yeah, hover wasp.
But it is the
Fantastic flavoured
sting
oil.
that gives wasps such a bad reputation, isn't it? I mean, people just see them around their picnics. You call them in your book, sort of the the troublesome yellow jackets at picnics or something along those
Yeah.
lines. And they can sting, and people just think, well, they're just here to annoy me, and that's how they get a bad reputation. But they do actually play a role, don't they, in ecosystems?
Yeah, they do play around. You're absolutely right that if you ask people what they think about wasps, and we've run a survey on this that we've published, the only word that people have to describe wasps is sting, along with annoying and lots of other rude words. And that's kind of, that's the interactions that we have with wasps. It's at our picnics, and it's the end of summer when we're desperately trying to enjoy those last few sunny days with our fresco dining. And then along comes a wasp, and it's a bit, hovering around us, and we're thwacking it away with our arms and we're shouting at it. And by doing that, we're actually behaving just like their natural predator, the badger, which of course they have evolved to respond to those cues of flailing limbs when the badger's digging up their nest or breathing heavily on them. And so it's no surprise that they end up stinging us.
So we should
But I
just
think
we should
I
sit
think
there quietly, should we, instead?
you should absolutely sit there quietly. Don't behave like a badger. Sit there quietly, watch them, see what they want, and then give them a little wasp offering. So early in the season, it tends to be protein that they're hunting. So they might want a bit of your sausage or your chicken. And then later on in the season, they switch to sugar foraging because most of the larvae by then have pupated. And most people don't realise that actually the adult wasps themselves are vegetarian, and they hunt prey to feed to the larvae. It's the larvae who are the carnivores. And when they feed the larvae give them a sugary reward in return through trophallaxis, this transfer of fluids between them. And that's a really important part of their nutrition. But at the end of the summer, the reason why wasps tend to impinge on our lives a bit more is that there's many fewer larvae to feed. So the wasps are kind of furloughed slightly from the colony, and that they have less work to do. But they're also getting less sugar from the larvae, and they have to go and look for sugar elsewhere. So normally that would have been flowers. They do visit flowers that make some good pollinators. But actually, your alfresco dining of
It's
jam
my
sandwiches and
beer. Yeah,
beer
I
and
like my
prosecco,
beer.
whatever it is, lemonade, they will happily go for that instead. So that's why we end up encountering wasps a lot more at the end of the summer.
So does that mean sort of what you said that, we're sort of behaving like their natural prey, their predator, sorry, the badger. And we think of wasps as pretty aggressive. So if we didn't respond in that way, is it that they leave us alone?
Well, they don't leave you alone. They're just, they're not going to sting you. So often what they will do, which can be quite intimidating, I have to confess, is that they will fly in this kind of zigzag in front of your face and they are eyeing you up. And the reason they're doing that is not that they're thinking about where to sting you or how to sting you. It's that they're using you as a landmark because they're very visual creatures and they want to know how to come back to your jam sandwich or your beer. And so they're eyeing up the landmarks around them such that they know when they come back, they'll know how to find you. So it can be, a wasp was actually doing this to me the other day, and it's early in the summer, but it was kind of like moving around me, and I was like, going to use my own advice and not move. And they won't. I mean, it's unfortunate. I think the times when people do sit still and still get stung is if a wasp crawls up inside their shirt or their trousers. And wasps are more likely to do that than a bee, for example, because wasps will hunt prey in dark places. And so perhaps, crawling up your shorts leg was actually they thought that was a good strategy. There might be some, grasshopper hidden up there or something for them to hunt. And so they do, bees will always go towards light. Wasps will often go away from the light into dark places. And so that's when they start to they can get into places where bees can never even think of going. So things like wearing a bee suit is a good defense against wasps when we're digging up the colonies, but it never does the complete job because those wasps will find tiny holes that bees didn't even bother to think of.
But we're talking about yellow jackets now, but in fact, wasps are incredibly diverse, and some of the most remarkable ones are the parasitoid wasps that you talk about. And the one that fascinated me, I'd never heard of before, I think it's a type of jewel wasp that preys on you should describe what they do. Prey isn't quite the right word, really, is it? But they use, I think it's an American cockroach, which they sting, and then all sorts of crazy things happen. So do you want to tell us about that? I was just blown away.
Yeah, no, I mean, just coming back to your point about diversity there, you're absolutely right that the wasp that most people know as wasps is the yellow jackets, but there's a very small number of species of those. In fact, there's less than 70 species of all the yellow jackets and hornets combined, which are the wasps that most people think of. But actually, there's over 100,000 described species of wasps. There are probably 5 to 10 times that to be discovered, and most of that diversity is within the parasitoids. So the parasitoids don't sting, they have an ovipositor which they use to lay their eggs, and then in the aculeate wasps, the stinging wasps, it's the sting is a modified ovipositor, so it's evolved into a sting. But you're absolutely right, Tim, that they hunt prey in the same way that an aculeate stinging wasp will, but then they will paralyze it. No, sorry, that's not right. Let's cut that bit out.
We would cut that bit out.
Parasitoids. Yeah. So the parasitoids will hunt prey in the same way, but they will then not paralyze it or kill it at all. They will simply deposit their egg on it or in it. And then the egg hatches into a baby wasp, and then it'll eat the living host alive. And so they parasitize the host as a sort of food resource. And the jewel wasp is one of those kind of poster children of the parasitoids. So they will. So compared to the cockroach, the parasitoid wasp is actually quite small. So she can't fly away with the cockroach once she's found it. But what she will do is she will lay her. She'll sting it in 2 different places. So she'll sting it on the thorax to stop it sort of wandering around. And then she will sting it inject a, sorry, I've just realised, Tim, that you've led me at the garden path here because these are not parasitoids, these are predatory wasps.
Oh, yeah, okay. Do you want to, I realise that because you're talking about
that. This is why I got slightly confused.
We'll go back to just start answering my question after having done the diversity bit.
Right.
It was my fault. You're
sorry. I suddenly realised that I was on one track and we were talking about.
And correct me and just say no. They're not parasitoid wasps. They're stinging wasps, and then explain what they do. So, Rich, pick up again from here.
Yeah. Okay. So you're absolutely right about the diversity, but the cockroach hunting wasp, the jewel wasp, is actually not a parasitoid. It does actually have a sting. It's an aculeate wasp, and it's a predator. It will hunt its prey and then it will paralyze it. So there are about 30,000 species of stinging wasps, and a very small proportion. About 1 to 2% of them are social, so they live in the big societies like the yellow jacket wasps and the hornets. But the vast majority of them, around 30,000 species that have been described, are solitary hunters, and so they will hunt some prey, and like the cockroach, and they will paralyze it and bring it to a burrow, and then lay its egg on it, and then they will seal it up, and that's the end of parental care, and then the egg hatches out into the baby larva wasp, and it will eat this living larder, this paralyzed, preserved living larder for over the next few weeks until it's pupates. And so the jewel wasp is kind of the jewel of these examples, in that it does this really cool thing. And in fact, it's called the jewel wasp because it really does look like a jewel. It's really pretty and iridescent. But it hunts cockroaches, and the cockroach is much bigger than the wasp. So the wasp can't fly with the cockroach. So she has to have a better strategy she can't even carry it. It's just too big to get it back to her burrow. So what she does is she first stings it in the thorax to stop it running away, and immobilizes it. And then that enables her to give it a very direct sting into the brain where it injects this neurotoxin, which then basically renders the cockroach incapable of free will, if you like. But it can still move. And so then she grabs it by its antenna, and I believe she actually breaks off its antenna a bit and has a little slurp of the old hemolymph. And then she will basically lead it like a poodle to its underground tomb, to a little burrow. And so basically, the cockroach, in this sort of zombified state, will be led to its own tomb, where it will then be buried, paralyzed, alive but paralyzed, and then it will have a baby wasp, a cute baby wasp.
So if these wasps could make films and documentaries, Alien would be a documentary, wouldn't it? I mean,
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, there are so many. I mean, whenever I give talks about wasps to groups of school children, they always love the idea of this gruesome assassins that these wasps are. And then if you give the same talk to adults, they'll always go for, oh yes, wasps are really important in ecosystems as pest controllers. Oh yes, that's very important. But I think there is so much drama packed away in these stories of predatory stinging wasps that barely studied. I mean, they're so understudied.
Yeah, you got me thinking now. I wonder if that neurotoxin can be harnessed and, used in a therapeutic way. Who knows?
Well, I think that's another really exciting area of research. Not my own area of research, but I read quite a lot about it when I wrote my book. And there is a surprising amount of people who have studied the components of venom in wasps. Actually, mostly social wasps, to be fair, but inside the venom itself is kind of like an untapped medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
Lots of biochemicals of potential medicinal properties in there. But what we do know about this venom with these solitary wasps is quite interesting because if you think about it, they've got to paralyze a very specific kind of prey. So solitary wasps tend to hunt a very specific prey types. So you get the spider hunters and the cricket hunters and the fly hunters, and it's slightly generalizing, but largely they are moderately specialists in what they hunt. And that actually makes total evolutionary sense if you think about it, because in order to paralyze a spider, and of a particular size, then you probably need very different components in your venom to paralyzing a tiny fly, for example. And so I think there's probably been quite strong selection on these different lineages of wasps to have a very bespoke type of venom. Now, that's just an open question, really, open hypothesis. But there are already some medicinal properties that have been identified from wasp venom. And the two that spring to mind are bradiokinins, which are used in. Are you both nodding your heads? So you probably know more about this than I do.
I know, but you
Oh,
wrote
you're just
about
looking
it.
very sage.
You wrote about it, so yeah.
So bradykinins are often given to intensive care patients because it causes vasodilation, which means that then drugs can be pumped around the body much quicker. And so that also makes sense if you're trying to paralyze an enormous tarantula or something, which some wasps do, then you want it to happen quite quickly before the tarantula makes you their dinner. And so you have to get the venom around the body quite quickly. So it causes everything to kind of relax a bit. And then the other component with potential medical interest is our mastoporins, which are peptides, which have been shown to potentially be a cure for cancer because they cause cancerous cells to hemorrhage and explode. So that's kind of an exciting area of research.
Absolutely.
So
So,
we should probably take a break and go to our sponsors. But if you're enjoying this, please remember to subscribe and like and share. And further details of Seirian's book will be in the notes below.
Hi, Tim. You're looking particularly snazzy today. What are you wearing?
I'm wearing a piece from a company called Grace and Garbo. And actually, you know a little bit more about them than I do, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right, I do. And
You're
as
the
you can
fashion
see,
queen. Yeah.
I'm also wearing a piece from Grace and Garbo. So this is a delightful knitwear outfit set up in Birmingham. What they do is they source knitwear, quality knitwear from all around the world. So it's vintage, one-off pieces, many of which they then hand embellish, like the one you're wearing today with its beautiful purple flowers. And so they're big on sustainability. Nothing goes to waste. Everything is sort of recycled and reused. And if you want to know more about them, then have a look at the link beneath this episode.
And thank you very much to them for supporting our podcast. Hope their sales soar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Grace and Garbo.
Welcome back. Sorry, Syma, just before we were going to the break, I interrupted you. So you had another question, didn't you?
I just wanted to ask you about more bizarre behaviour. So obviously, as you just talked about, I think probably most of our listeners will not have known about the cockroach parasitizing behaviour of these jewel wasps. But are there any other bizarre behaviours that perhaps people are unaware of, do you think?
Well, I would, rather than bizarre, I would actually, there's a fabulous story packed away in one of the commonest solitary wasps that you find in the UK, and that's the bee wolf. So any sandy soils, particularly in the southern part of the UK, you will find in the summer, you'll find these little wasps that are called bee wolves. And as the name suggests, they are wolves of bees. They hunt bees. And everybody goes, oh no, the poor bees. But really, their numbers are not having any impact at all. So what they do is they capture the bee and they fly back to their nest with it, the burrow that they've already dug, and then they will embalm it. They'll lick it all over, which forms a kind of waxy coating. And that provides them the prey, which is a paralysed honeybee, with a first line of defence against diseases. Now, it's worth saying that actually bees apparently are incredibly mucky and full of, diseases and, fungi and bacteria. They love bees. So if you just left a paralysed bee in the soil, it would just grow lots of stuff on it. And the wasp baby itself would have, would be outcompeted by microorganisms and fungi. And so these bee wolves have evolved a remarkable portfolio of ways of disease management. So the first thing is the embalming, and then the second thing is the coolest thing, and I was blown away when I learnt about this, was that from their antenna they will exude streptomyces bacteria, which of course produce streptomycin, which along with penicillin is one of the most important antibiotics that we use. So basically, the wasp has this mutualistic association with the streptomyces, which its antennae have even got sort of special depressions in it where the bacteria live. So it's a real symbiosis. So they put these streptomyces into this little cocoon. So then you've got your waxy cuticle, and then you've got your antibiotics topped inside. And then the idea is that when the wasp egg hatches, the larva will kind of spread the antibiotic around the cocoon and as it eats its living larder. But even better than that, you've obviously got a critical period of like a day or two before the egg hatches into a larva. And so the egg itself has its own disease management. It gives off kind of toxic farts of nitrous oxide, which is a fungicide. And so that kind of keeps them safe before the larva can distribute the antibiotic. So I think this is utterly incredible. And it's all come from a group in Germany. And it's just one solitary wasp. And to my knowledge, there are no other solitary wasps that have been explored to this level in terms of its disease management. But if we started doing the same kind of studies on other solitary wasps, who knows what we would find? So I think people can't be impressed by wasps when they hear that. I don't know what will impress them.
It's amazing. And the other thing that I didn't know until I read your book was that bees and ants are actually descended from wasps a long time ago. So they're kind of the wasp came first, and then these social
Yeah.
other social animals came about. That's right. And solitary bees, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so across the they're all Hymenoptera. So
Yeah.
bees, wasps, and ants all belong to the order Hymenoptera. And the original, first, the oldest, evolutionarily oldest Hymenoptera is actually, it is a wasp. It's the horn tail or the wood wasp or the sawfly. It's a wasp.
Yeah.
And actually, they still are, they're still around. They're vegetarians, so they will lay their eggs in plants, and then the grub will eat the plant. And most people get a bit scared when they see a horntail because they look like really big, stumpy wasps because they lack the wasp waist, the constricted petiole between the thorax and the abdomen.
So do I, by the way, just for
Oh, they kind of really scary, but they can't sting, and they have this, but they have an ovipositor that often looks like it can sting you because
okay.
it's often sticking out. So people get terrified. They're really impressive organisms. And then from the sawflies, the parasitoid wasp lineage evolved, and there was a key innovation that happened in that jump. Not only did parasitoid wasps start exploiting prey as opposed being carnivores, the larvae, as opposed to plants. But they also evolved the wasp waist, which then meant that they could fold around their abdomen to reach a diversity of different niches. And that might be one of the reasons why parasitoid wasps have, parasitized such a huge diversity of prey, of insects across the world. Apparently, every insect has its own parasitoid wasp. You had to check that with an actual
Every single one. Wow.
every single one, apparently. And many of them have multiple parasitoids.
And parasitoid wasps have their own parasitoids as well. Is that right?
Hyperparasitoids, that's right. Absolutely, yeah. So there's a whole, like, it's like a whole Russian doll
Yeah.
of parasitism. I mean, it's truly phenomenal. And then the stinging wasp evolved from a parasitoid wasp lineage. And that was the innovation was the ovipositor evolving into the sting, and then the social wasps there are just two origins of sociality in the wasp. But then also you're absolutely right, Tim, that the bees and the ants evolved from these aculeate wasps. So bees are just vegetarian wasps. They lost the ability to hunt prey, and instead they evolved the ability for their offspring to be reared on pollen. And then the ants are simply a single lineage of social wasps. They're basically social wasps that have forgotten how to fly. So apart from the sexuals, which most of them still have wings
Yes.
for
Yeah.
dispersal and mating, the workers of ants don't fly. So yeah, so basically everything is a wasp. And that's another reason why we should stay wasps.
So I guess we haven't touched at all on the sort of the impact of wasps on the ecosystem, and I think it's something that we hear a lot about vaguely, most of us, and we know they're important, but the details I think for most of us are probably a bit scarce. So what do you think would be sort of a take-home message there?
I'm so pleased to hear that you say that most of us are vaguely aware that they do something useful, because I think that's quite a new thing. I think most people, and in fact, I know this because I gathered data on it from the public, most people don't understand what wasps do. People do understand what bees do. So the general public know that bees pollinate. In fact, you can stop a 5-year-old on the street and they will be able to tell you all about pollination. We've educated ourselves, and the media have done a great job in that with publicising the importance of pollinators and bees. Wasps, on the other hand, that we have data to prove that people don't understand what wasps do. But what the main role that wasps have in ecosystems is as hunters and regulators of other insect and arthropod populations. So in short term, they are pest controllers. So they play a really important role in regulating those insect populations. And we don't know a huge amount about it, but we're starting to get more of a grip on this. And social wasps in particular have potentially a very big impact on their local ecosystems, because they have, just because of the thousands of brood that they have to feed. And also social wasps, so your common yellow jacket that bothers you at picnics, they tend to be quite generalist predators. And so we think that probably what they're doing is they're just creaming off whatever is really abundant in the environment. So that means that they're unlikely to hunt anything to local extinction, for example, which if you want, so lots of the parasitoid wasps are used as biocontrol agents because they're very specific on what they hunt. And so they're very good at getting rid of a particular kind of crop pest, for example. It doesn't mean that social wasps are not useful for biocontrol. It just means that they can be used in a different way. And if you think about it as a sort of apex predator within an environment like a wolf or something, they are the wolves of the insect world, where they are really take the wolves out of the ecosystem. Tim knows all about this. I don't know why I'm saying it. The wolves out
Everyone
of the
always ends
ecosystem.
up talking about wolves.
Oh, no. And well, you take the top predator out, and then everything gets out of balance. So that's exactly basically what we do when we remove a wasp nest from our loft or our garden. We are upsetting the ecosystem.
So tell us how you study wasps, though, Seirian, because I think you've spent quite a lot of time lying on the floor in forests or heathlands or, all sorts of environments trying to work out what these animals do. I mean, they're not always very easy to study, are they?
Well, I think a bit for any insect. I mean, the great thing about social insects, more so than solitary, so most of my work's been on social, is that if you find a nest, you've got quite a few individuals there to watch. But the unit of replication for study, of course, is the nest. So ideally, my favourite places are when I find huge aggregations of wasp nests, and that's where my gateway wasp, the hover wasp, the Malaysian hover wasp, they do tend to live in aggregation. So often you'd find bridges or culverts which are hundreds of nests under them, which for some people would be their idea of hell, but for me, obviously, that's heaven.
And then you put marks on some of the wasps, though, don't you?
Yeah, we paint the
Yeah,
wasps.
yeah.
Yeah, so with just like Airfix paints, you get a pin head and or actually the base of a pin, the pointy bits, and then you can even on tiny wasps you can get 5 or 6 paint dots on them, and you can even put them on the wings as well, or on the larger wasps. So I after I finished with my my trainee gateway delicate tickling wasps, I moved on to the one of the biggest wasps that we have in the world, which is these Polistes paper wasps in the near tropics. And they're great because, okay, they've got a really vicious sting, but they're great because you can put one of those bee tag numbers that beekeepers use to tag their queens. And so we've got number tags then, so we give them numbers. And then another thing we've done is we've also put radio tags on them. This was back in like the early 2000, mid 2000s when it was, radio tags was kind of a new thing. But we put them on the wasps, and so they swiped in and out of their nests. And by doing that, we discovered this nest drifting behavior. Because in a social wasp colony, particularly in these Polistes wasps, where all the wasps on the nest are capable of reproduction. So unlike your honeybee or your yellow jacket wasp, where you've got the queen and the workers are sterile, in these very simple societies that these paper wasps build or live in, all of the individuals can become a reproductive. They can mate, they can lay eggs, they can do everything. And yet they choose not to. They choose to stay at home and help. So they're brilliant models for understanding the evolution of altruism and group living. But one of the paradoxes, so I was in Panama studying this, and we started getting wasps on the wrong nest. We'd be doing these censuses, and it's like, wow, we're really sloppy. Number 32 should be on nest 64. Why is it on this nest? And then I got these radio tags to try and eliminate human error, and still 50% of the wasps were on the wrong nest. So that was like really weird. So we did some genetics and we did some manipulation experiments, and several years later we figured out that these wasps that drift from one nest to another are actually visiting nests to which they are related. So they're most related to their home nest because they are usually the daughter of the breeder. So it's good to help raise siblings because you're passing on your genes by raising your siblings. But they visit other nests, which they are less related to, but still have some level of relatedness. So their help is still worth something in terms of genetics. So that's kind of cool. But then what was even cooler is that we realized that what they were doing is that they were apportioning their help based on the nest that most needed their help.
Oh, wow.
All to do with the worker brood ratio. So if you happen to be a worker on on your home nest and there's loads of workers and not that many larvae, and then there's a nest just a few meters away where they are, distantly related but still related, and there are not many workers but there's loads of larvae, then there is a need for help. And so your help is worth more on those nests depending on that worker brood ratio.
It seems like given the state the world's in right now, we could probably learn quite a lot about wasps from wasps, right? About how to organize ourselves.
Yeah, no, there are so many lovely analogies, and I think that's one of the things that really gripped me when I first was lying on the rainforest floor looking at these social wasps in Malaysia. They're like half, a few centimeters from my face. That I realised that they are like a little soap opera, and especially if you've marked all of them individually and you've watched them be, when they popped out of their pupal cell because you were there, and you marked them and you've given them a name tag basically, and so you fall in love with yellow, green, pink, and you know that yellow, green, pink is going to beat up blue, blue, white, and you kind of build up this whole little social network. But we use social network analyses to sort of analyze their interactions, and it is quite a drama. There's a whole soap opera happening in there, and I think the analogies with humans are particularly compelling with these simple societies where they're all capable of autonomous behaviours and autonomous reproductive strategies.
Well, certainly we're running out of time, unfortunately. We try and keep our podcasts to about half an hour, and we always overrun by a few minutes as we've done now. But just before we kind of finish off, my favourite wasp, and I am a zoologist, has always been the tarantula hawk, which preys on tarantulas, and I've seen them in the southern states and South America. But what's your favourite wasp? I think I know what you're going to say from your book, but I want to. Yeah.
Well, actually, before I wrote my book, I was very clear on what my favourite wasp was, and it is Polistes canadensis, which is the big Polistes that I've worked on a lot in Panama. And the reason why it's my favourite is, I guess it was the first time that I started my independent research programme myself, so it was my wasp, my thing. But also we sequenced the genome of it, and I know that's terribly boring now, everyone's sequencing genomes, but it was the first aculeate wasp genome, apart from Nozonia, which is parasitoid. It was the first aculeate wasp genome to be sequenced. So I feel like that has to be my favourite.
I thought you were going to say the Heath Potter wasp.
Oh, well, you know what? I think, yeah, so
I'll let you have two.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like you can't have a favourite child, can you?
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I absolutely love those. And, John Walters, who taught me how to find them, was on the heathlands of Dorset, was just really inspirational. And I think, sadly, I've not had much chance to work on them since the pandemic. So most of my work was being done in the tropics, and then the pandemic happened and we couldn't go anywhere. And so I had to look at wasps on my doorstep. And I realised actually we've got a huge number of incredible wasps in the UK. And the potter wasp was one of them. And they are very, very endearing, but they're really hard to work on because they're hard to find. You read in my book how it's impossible to find these little pots. And you have to run across the heathland trying to following this wasp and not looking down because you'll lose the wasp. But then, I mean, they are exquisite. They build these beautiful sort of Romanesque style pots. And solitary wasps, they hunt caterpillars, and they're just really, really beautiful. So I could actually be in love with every single wasp. You give me another wasp and I will tell you how beautiful it is.
Well, thank you very much, Seirian, for telling us about wasps and coming on the podcast. And I mean, our listeners really should read your book. It's Endless Forms, and I've forgotten the subtitle. There's a subtitle.
Why you should love wasps.
Yeah, there you go. And your enthusiasm for wasps is really evident in this podcast, but it comes across in the book as well. And it really is a must read for everyone. So thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Wow. Well, what did you think of that then, Syma? Do you now think you should have perhaps behaved a little differently when you had your supper, or did you get it right?
I mean, if you're asking, do you think I should have sat down and stroked the wasps? Then no, I think I got it right actually. But no, it was fascinating. I mean, just the different. I hadn't realized there were so many different types of wasps.
No, I mean they're incredibly speciose group, and they range from these parasitic ones, these parasitoid wasps, as you said, that lay their eggs in all sorts of other insects. And I think nearly every insect has its own wasp that does that. And the one that she talked about, the jewel wasp that preys on the American cockroach, and it actually stings it, and then it leads the zombified cockroach to its lair where it then lays its eggs in. I mean, I didn't know that story, but it's in her book, but it's quite remarkable to be
I
honest.
mean, it's more horrific than most sort of fictional science fiction stories, right?
I know. And then I mean the other thing that I think is interesting is that earlier on in the season, so the adult wasps are vegetarian, the yellow jackets that we get around picnics and things, the ones that kept you from your dinner the other day. Those ones, the fact that the adults are vegetarian, but they feed their brood, the young, meat, and then they lick off the sugar solution. But then when the brood start to kind of become adult wasps themselves, they're not getting that sugar solution. That's why they come and drink your wine,
Yeah,
the beer, and what have you, anything sugary.
it's an intriguing sort of evolutionary path that's got them there, right? I mean, it's fascinating to think how that all came about.
I know, and they get such a bad press as well. No one likes wasps because they hurt when they sting. They fly around together. They do that thing where they zigzag in front of you when they're
Oh yeah, gosh.
trying to work out what they're looking at, and so they get this bad press. But actually, they're important predators in the ecosystem, and without them, we'd have a lot more pest insects, and we'd probably moan more about them. So hopefully, our listeners will start to appreciate wasps a little bit more, and we'll go and read Serian's book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that also if you're having a mango margarita,
Is that what you were having with
it's
your son? Was it?
a chili mango margarita, keep away. Yeah, just sort of, the wasps seem to like them quite a lot.
Yeah, I think the thing is, don't panic, and chances of getting stung if you're just ignoring them is pretty slim. I mean, it's not zero. They still might, but it's pretty slim. But
Sure.
I hope people. I mean, I think Sarin was just a fantastic advocate for wasps.
Yeah, absolutely.
So enthusiastic. What a great guest, and her book is well worth a read. Endless Forms, it's called. So.
Absolutely, and we'll provide the links with this episode, guys. So please take a look.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, good to chat, Simon, and I'll talk to you next week.
Cool. Look forward to it, Tim. Take care.
Yeah, and you. Bye, everyone.